You know I've been trying to do this for a long time, and I'm so excited that I finally did it! Ah! Okay, I'm going to talk about this openly, freely. If you don't want to know what happens because you haven't read it, for whatever reason, duck out now. I do have a spoiler-free review available on my channel. Go check that out instead. And when you're done, feel free to come back and listen to me talk about all of this madness. Hi, welcome to Early Reading. I'm Sam. Today is my spoiler review of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings series. I've spent the last couple years reading it. I believe in 2022 and 2023. I read Fellowship in 2022, and I started on Two Towers. I finished this one in early 2023, and then in 2023 I read Return of the King. So in December, I finally finished it, and now, here we are, able to talk about it. It's been if you saw my spoiler-free review, you know I've been trying to do this for a long time, and I'm so excited that I finally did it! Ah! Okay. So starting with Fellowship, this one is my favorite. This one is my favorite in the series. I really love following the Fellowship. For me, it really didn't feel all that different from the movie, so it was very easy to follow. I really liked it. Some of my favorite aspects are the interactions between all the characters. I love seeing the way that Legolas and Gimli's friendship develops over the course of all three books, but especially in this one since they're very much at odds with each other. I found them to be one of the most interesting dynamics in the series. I also really like the way that this does set up a lot of Middle-earth and the Shire. Especially since Return of the King comes back to the Shire and things are different. This really sets a good foundation in partnership with The Hobbit to know what life is like there now and how different the entire world is from the Shire. I think the Shire is probably one of my favorite places in Middle-earth. It's lively. Like it has a very earthy feel, the way that the Elvish areas of Middle-earth do, but it just feels so much more cozy and homey to me, and I love that. I also really enjoy all the different songs that Tolkien has added into here. That always reminds me of The Hobbit, since there are several songs included there, so that always feels like a fun throwback to my childhood reading times, and I like that carries on into this series. And honestly, this is going to sound absurd, but I mentioned this previously. My favorite thing about this book is that it follows a linear progression. So we just follow the Fellowship from point A to point B and the adventures along the way. And I really appreciate that, because it might be just traditional. It might just be very simple, but it really helped me get engrossed in the story enough to where I did want to binge read, even though the chapters are very long. Fellowship, I feel like, is a very good setup for the rest of the series. And it's going to be writing my number 2 slot for Tolkien books, probably for a decent while, unless one of the other works that I read this year or next year ends up somehow dethroning my number 2, because I really don't think anything's going to dethrone The Hobbit for me. The Two Towers is where I first really started to kind of struggle. I wasn't going to not finish, but I wasn't going to put it down. There was no way I was going to put it down. It's just that it took a lot more time to get through and to find a flow for, because the way that it's set up with part 1 and part 2, where I guess it'd be book 3 and book 4. Yes. Book 3 following Merry and Pippin and the rest of the former Fellowship was really good. Like, initially, though, I was really wondering what happened to Frodo and Sam after the conclusion of this, when they get in the boat and they leave. But then you go and you pick up with Merry and Pippin, which I understand happens because, like, that's how the movies are set up. But the way that the movies are done carried on that linear progression that Fellowship did and that modern fantasy does, where you do alternate between the characters, so you see everything unfolding parallel to each other. It threw me off that we're only following Merry, Pippin, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli and what they're doing. I did enjoy meeting the writers of the Rohirrim. Rohan was really, really enjoyable. Meeting Theoden King and Eowyn, who I absolutely loved here. It's fun, but I had wanted to know what happened to Frodo and Sam, and the fact they're left to the second half of this volume it drove me crazy, and I was like, but this isn't, I can't just read book 4 before I read book 3, but now I gotta sit through all the other stuff, and it's interesting, and it's fun once I accepted that. It just took me a moment to accept it. The chapters are also very long, but because I was already kind of disjointed from the beginning, it was a little harder for me to sit and say, I'm going to read like 4 or 5 of these super long chapters at one time and keep going. I would maybe read 1 or 2 at a time, or I'd put it down and read something from the library and then jump back in and read a chapter. I took me out of town, and that's actually where I got most of my reading for it done, was out of town, because it was a little bit easier to start and stop when my external scenery was changing alongside my reading. The parts with Frodo and Sam I did enjoy in Two Towers. I did really enjoy this book, but I went from a 5-star read to what I qualified as like a 3.5 rounded up to a 4. I did love the descriptions, I did love Middle-earth, I did love the characters, but the structure doesn't work for me as well as Fellowship does. I'm sure that maybe other readers have had similar opinions, I don't know. I haven't actually watched anyone else's spoiler reviews of the series before doing this, because I didn't want any kind of influence on my thoughts or anything like that. I've tried to go as cold turkey as I can with these. I did really enjoy Frodo and Sam's parts, though. Getting to meet Faramir here was fun, and also getting to take more time with Smeagol with more of a focus on those 3 and the way they interact with each other was really fun. I found that it was easier to understand the frustrations with Smeagol and the progression and the obsession that he has when there is just a focus on the individual parts. So if we had been following Merry, Pippin, and Frodo and Sam and Gollum, I feel like maybe I wouldn't have really noticed. I really felt like this structure does work. It just isn't what I was used to with the previous 2 Tolkien books I've read, so it did throw me for a big, big loop. I'm still trying to figure out my overall order on them, but Two Towers I have a very mixed relationship with. I really loved the chapters with the Ents. I liked getting to meet Treebeard in book form. That really did work for me. I liked getting more of the lore of the Ents and feeling what their home is actually like in detail a lot better. I'm also glad that one of my favorite parts from the Two Towers movie is actually in the book originally, and that is in the Battle of Helm's Deep, when Gimli and Legolas are having their competition and counting up the foes that they've vanquished. I didn't know that that was part of the book, and when I came across it, like, I was hoping it was here, but I was like, I'm not sure, and the fact that it was made me super duper happy. That's... The Ents and the Battle of Helm's Deep are probably some of my favorite parts. No, they are my favorite parts of the Two Towers, hands down. I love those moments. They feel so epic, and they really do make Middle-earth feel like a very grounded place with a long history. I think that's something that Tolkien really excels at, is world building. And I mean, I'm sure most people would say that. The world building of Middle-earth is very well done. It does feel very lived in. It does have portions that feel different from one another, that emit different vibes, if you will. So I do feel immersed in a world, even when I'm feeling disjointed from the action happening in it, if that makes any sense. Moving on to Return of the King. This one was very interesting, and I did really, really enjoy it. I was more used to the split structure for the book 5, book 6 division here, thanks to Two Towers. So thank you for the primer before I got to the conclusion. That's much appreciated. And I did feel that it worked a little bit better here. I just thought it was kind of ironic that you would follow the ring at the end instead of building that up with the other action going on. It's not what I would have expected. If like the story had been outlined, I would have been like, oh, well, we're going to follow the ring predominantly and everything else kind of helps flesh things out. And in reality, the way Tolkien seems to treat it is that following the ring is important, but you have to wait for it, because you have to see how the world is playing out to see how the ring will affect it and how its role and existence, or eventual lack thereof, makes everything work or fall apart. I do really like in this book seeing the way that Merry and Pippin have grown as characters, and how they went from kind of being, just hobbits, but also kind of like troublemaking little buggers, to being very helpful in their own right. Like, they start to take on that role with the Ents, but they really grow into their own individually in Return of the King. I really, really enjoyed following Pippin, especially. That little bugger is always causing some kind of mix-up, and I love it, but at the same time I'm always like, Pippin, what are you doing? Pippin again? Again, Pippin. Pippin, why you do this? But it's really fun seeing the way that his perspective seems to change and how he takes on more responsibility when he gets to Gondor. Denethor is such a jerk. I think the things that drove me most crazy about this, besides the pacing, was Denethor as a character. Like, oh my gosh, I can't stand that guy. Urgh! And like, I kind of saw it when I was watching the films, the third one with Denethor. It's like, you kind of get his pain as a father, having lost his son, but at the same time, I didn't really feel the weight of the corruption that he had within his kingdom with Saruman's orb. I hadn't felt the weight of it in the movie the way that I felt it in the book. So I understand his character more here, but he also drives me crazier because you spend a lot more time hearing him talk and seeing Gondor and meeting its people. Definitely a love-hate relationship. I love the build-up there, but oh man, he's the kind of guy that I just want to punch in the face. Honestly. And then I did really also like moving towards Sam and Frodo. I did really enjoy that. They also have moments of reflection where Frodo's getting weaker, and while Sam is getting physically weaker, he's also getting emotionally stronger. And I really loved that dynamic that was going on. I loved seeing a lot more of how they actually made their way into Mordor, because they did simply walk in, but they didn't simply walk in. My favorite parts in these books, I really love Eowyn's stand. I mean, at this point, it's so well known, and it's such a basic loophole in a way, but I love seeing it done here, because I think this is one of the most iconic uses of the I'm not a man way of taking down an enemy. And I love the passion that she has. I love the way she just refuses to sit back and watch her father and her brother go into war and just sit and wait for them to come back. I'm not the biggest fan of the Aragorn pining, but I mean, I get it. Like, how can you not get it? But I do love that you also have more of an extension of her relationship with Faramir and how that kind of grows. But I think that aspect also could have been done better. It's not a deal breaker by any means. I feel like the relationship, like the romantic relationships in Return of the King are to their most minimum possible. I'm not saying it has to be a romance. I'm not saying anything like that at all. It's just that it's a lot of from a distance work where it seems like a tiny detail that is thrown in to be like, by the way, they're in love. By the way, they're in love. We're going to have weddings and be happy. And it's not, I don't feel like those aspects are really built up. I really feel like Gimli's admiration of Galadriel is more elaborated on and it develops more fully than Aragorn's relationship with Arwen or, you know, Faramir's relationship with Éowyn. And the fact that those are the parts that are like that kind of conclude the novel, or like they almost felt weak by that point because the battles felt so strong. You know, ending with the throne and the battlefield were like the key points, and then ending in the Shire is really, really like finally ending in the Shire is like icing on the cake. But those relationships in between are like, it's almost like it's an afterthought, which, I mean, okay. I felt like the movies did a much better job with those aspects since it's a lot easier to see them and to feel emotion through the music and the cinematography there than what Tolkien provides in words on the page, even though, honestly, I would have thought it could be the other way around because everything else is so much more developed in the book than in the movie. I think is one of the weaker points. It's probably one of my general critiques. It's not a deal breaker, though. But I do love Éowyn's stand because she has finally reached this point where she wants to play an active role and no one wants her to, but she's one of the big turning points. And she says, no, I have every means and right of being at the core of this conflict, and I'm going to be there. My family's there, I'm there. These are my people just as much as they're my father's people or my brother's people. And I think that it's really great for Tolkien to have set that up the way he did. Tolkien's really great at making the knights and heroes of Middle-earth. It's not so great at making the relationships and marriages of the kingdom. Like, yeah, no. Bring on the swords and heroes, because Éowyn shines there so much. And I had really liked Arwen in the movies, but I ended up liking Éowyn in the book so much more. Like, I really, really love her character, and I was surprised to see that she was so fleshed out here, considering she isn't a main focal point of any of the books. You know, she just kind of comes in halfway through and has like the tiniest glimpses of appearance, and in those moments she really does shine, and I love that. As I mentioned in my last video, the pacing towards the end felt really off because like the battle ends and then it's stagnant periods of waiting. So then we get the Éowyn and Faramir points, and then we get the weddings, and then we get the thrones, and then finally the hobbits can go home after all these celebrations have happened. And that just felt like it kept dragging on, and I was like, can we stop like, I know it took us a long time to get here, but like, enough with the celebrations. I'm ready to call this party closed and, you know, take a nap. But getting back to the Shire, I found was a very strong story point. I liked seeing the change in Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin when they come home. They're no longer just hobbits who don't have a taste for adventure. They're certified heroes who have seen more than most of these people in the Shire have, and they are ready to take back their home. They're not going to sit down to anybody now. They're best friends with the king. So having them come in and save their own home at the end of everything, I thought was a really amazing decision. I just wish we had gotten to it sooner. So much sooner. I also think it's a fun contrast that Frodo is so hesitant still to hurt anyone and to do anything. Like, his compassion is still very much intact in a pacifistic, very traditional Hobbit way, whereas Merry and Pippin are ready to smite down anyone who says that their home has to change. I thought that was it's such a fun shift because they started off as such homebody hermits who don't do action and fighting. Now they're ready to take up arms and save everyone, and I love that they actually get to mostly do that. I thought it was a really great way to end the series. But again, if we had just gotten to that a little bit sooner. I actually wish that that had been in the movies. I would love to see that final stand taken in the Shire. Because, like, so many things just end with, you know, the battle and it's over and yay! We don't see how anything falls into place after that. But the coming home, I feel, is so important because they did talk about home so much. And they're like, we have to finish this quest because if we don't, there is no home. So the fact they do get to go back and Tolkien takes the time to say, let's take the warriors home. Let's throw them back into where they started and see how they have changed and see how their lives will be going forward, I thought was brilliant. That was really, really great. This one is definitely about a 4 or a 4.5 for me. I felt like it was much stronger in a way than Two Towers. It did take me a little while to get through, but I had a lot less pausing since the structure was so similar to Two Towers, and I had already slogged through this one. So this one didn't feel like as much of a slog until the end because it just kept coming and coming and coming. I'm very, very happy that I finally read it. It's not going to top The Hobbit for me, but it is now one of my favorite fantasy series that I've read. I think this one I have up there with The Immortals Quartet by Tamora Pierce. I haven't revisited in a long time. I read it once in middle school and it was very formative for me. Very influential and inspirational for me. But I want to revisit it. So, yeah, I have this up there with those. Those are some of my favorite fantasy reads. Also, Deltora Quest. I don't know if anyone was familiar with Deltora Quest by Emily Rodda. Rodda, R-O-D-D-A. I loved those books. Those are like children's fantasy. And for me, it was like The Hobbit, Deltora Quest, and then Immortals Quartet. And now I've got to throw Lord of the Rings in there somewhere. I'm making a big move to read more fantasy books, like the bigger series. I have these, and I've got a bunch of other things. I have the first 2 books of Game of Thrones. I've read the first one. Haven't read the second. I'm working on those. So you'll eventually see those from me. I don't know when. But yeah, I'm really getting back into fantasy. I used to read it more than I do now. Like, I read the Tales of King Arthur and all those sorts of things. It's just been a good minute since I've read very much fantasy as a focus. I tended to delve more into science fiction for a while, or into like YA fantasy. And so getting back into epic and high fantasy is going to be really fun. Really liked Lord of the Rings. 4-star series, 5-star fellowship, 3.5, 4, 4.5 for these. I really, really enjoyed my walk through Middle Earth, and I'm excited to get back into it with more Tolkien reads. If you have a recommendation for which of Tolkien's works I should read next, please leave them down below, or you can message them to me on Instagram, where you can find me at Royally Reading or Dreams of Tomorrowland. Preferably do it on Royally Reading, though, because that's where I tend to have all of my big fantasy adult reading done. Thank you so much for watching. This is a very long video, so I appreciate you sitting through this and listening to me ramble about Middle Earth. Like, share, comment. If you leave recommendations down below, I will take note of them and add them to my TBR to read and feature in later videos. For everyone who keeps coming back, you are my MVPs on this channel. I appreciate you. I love seeing your comments. They make me so happy, and I'm so glad that you keep coming back to visit me and my books. So I will see you all in the next video.